Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastar.com, prints great-looking coffee bags for a host of your favorite coffee companies of all sizes, that trust Roastar to produce packages worthy of their specialty coffee beans. It's Roastar's mission, their ethos, to help their customers tell their stories, big or small. That includes those of you roasting coffee at home. If you're a small roaster wanting to share your coffee with friends and family, Roastar will support you too. Head to roastar.com to learn more about their quick turnaround times, digital printing, and smaller print runs. You can also use their design lab to create an entirely new package in the blink of an eye. In short, Roastar Coffee Packaging can help you. And on roastar.com, you can start with a quote and end with the perfect coffee bag to share your story. Now, on to the show.
Hopefully you have enough editing tools to make me sound intelligent, but we'll get there when we get there. So
if it works enough for me, it'll work enough for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Coffee People Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. This show is presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging and is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network. Go to roastwestcoast.com to find recaps of this show, our Coffee Smarter podcast, and so much more. On this podcast, we connect with guests who have some connection to the coffee industry. For 12 seasons, we've been sharing the stories of roasters, baristas, farmers, scientists, artists, tech entrepreneurs, and more. We delve into entrepreneurship, motivation, and inspiration, often with a great cup of coffee. Our guest today is Max Zelenevich, the head roaster and co-founder of Brainwave Roasters in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Brainwave is a new company, but Max isn't a new roaster. He's been a home roaster for a long time, and we're going to get into that momentarily. While you're listening today, be sure to click on the links in this podcast's show notes and follow at Brainwave Roasters on Instagram, or check out their current coffees on offer at brainwaveroasters.com. You'll also find the links in our newsletter, which you can sign up for on roastwestcoast.com. It comes once a week, and you can listen to this show right there in the email. Today, I'm drinking a Crossings Coffee Roasters cold brew, because despite it being late October, we've been wandering in and out of heat waves like a drunken sailor steering a ship through the Caribbean. Wherever you are, I hope you have a mug or three of good coffee to enjoy while you listen to this Coffee People Podcast episode featuring Max Zelenevich of Brainwave Roasters.
yeah, my name's Max Zelenevich. I am part owner, co-owner, head roaster, kind of the failed social media person. If there's a bad social media person on our website, that's me. I don't know how to make a reel, but all of that for Brainwave Coffee Roasters. We're a month and a half old at this point. So at this stage, I'm still feeling like a home roaster at my heart. I have been for a while. So I live in Philadelphia. I grew up in a small town outside of Philadelphia, so kind of confined to this area for a long time, but spent a lot of time at work traveling the United States, out of the country. So gotten to see a lot of things over the years, which has been great. Outside of work, I'm avid climber. Adventure cyclist, I'll call it that. I have a bike that I ride on the road and on some gravel roads. And then every once in a while, I'm like, hey, I don't know what that is. I'm going to go try to ride on it, inevitably fall and, have a good time with it. So nothing serious.
All right. Well, that's the show, Max. Appreciate it. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to get into a lot of kind of the details about Brainwave, which is exciting, a new company right on the cusp of beginning. I noticed you didn't introduce yourself as Champion Max Zelenevich. You recently won not a home roasting, you won an overall roasting competition hosted by one of our sponsors, Sasea Coffee Source. But you not only won the Judges Award, but you won the People's Choice Award. As a new roaster, new company, how'd that feel?
I'm happy that I know that happened. I saw they posted something on Instagram. I almost didn't watch it. In fact, I watched 80% of it. I was hoping maybe for fifth place. I entered just to get some unbiased feedback on coffee. I didn't even know there were prizes, so I'm still processing this all. But yeah, I watched Instagram video and I was like, didn't get fifth or fourth. That's okay. And scrolled to the end, wasn't paying attention, and I heard my name brought up. I said, "What is happening right now?" Got all flustered, and I rewound a little bit and went back and listened. I was like, "This must be a mistake. There's no way." And it happened. And I didn't know about the People's Choice until the results were posted. I guess my heart was beating so fast I couldn't hear. But yeah, it was really kind of a wild experience. I didn't expect any of this. I'm honored, completely honored. I love Hisea. I love the coffees they make. And I saw the email come out, and as soon as I saw it, I'm like, immediately, sounds fun. I've never made a blend before. Why don't I try it? And here we are.
I was in the room. I was one of the judges. I tried every single one of the roasts. I think there was over 70 that we tried from roasters all over the place, including some champion roasters who were participating. And it was very clear that there was about a top five in the room. Like, even though we weren't talking about it, we weren't supposed to be sharing our notes. You could almost hear people go, oh yeah, that, yep, okay, because we had been doing it all day, and when one stood out, it really stood out. It's a challenge when you have 70 people roasting the same coffee.
Mhm.
There's going to be a lot of overlap. So it took a lot to stand out. And then I was there when they announced the award. And I think even then, as much as you were confused, I think people in the room were a little confused because they're like, we think he's a guy. He's in Philadelphia. He might have a company. We're not sure yet.
Yeah.
We're figuring it out. But either way, congratulations. A really cool achievement. And, it was exciting for me to be part of it. Before you started roasting, do you remember having a first experience with coffee that kind of got you started, or that maybe planted a seed at some point?
Yeah. I'll maybe give a little background to kind of build up to my turning point with coffee. I've worked as an environmental scientist for a long time, very analytical brain, but a hobby of mine has been homebrewing, brewing beer, and been doing that 13 years. I went through a beer judging certification program. I've been involved with judging that, so kind of gotten to develop my palate. Had a part-time job at a winery for a while. I was giving tastings, loved it, and I loved connecting with people. So, but at that point, coffee had always been sort of this thing that I liked, loved, I'll say. I knew I didn't like the chains. I knew I didn't like kind of the grocery store coffees. Couldn't tell you why. I went to small coffee shops. I got small bags from roasters and loved all the cups. But to me, it was just like, this is delicious. And I think, like a lot of people, I had a natural Ethiopian coffee and said, what am I drinking right now? What is this flavor? Is this coffee? And clicked to me at that point in the same way that I was able to connect with people at the winery of, oh, there's flavors here. This isn't just coffee. This is blueberry. There's spice to some of it. There's fruits. There's, you know, sometimes vegetables, which happens, but there's this nuance, and they work together and they play together, and that kind of just sparked in my brain this idea of, I know I like coffee, but now I'm into this. I'm hooked. I need to find more. Try to explore as much as I can. Going to different coffee shops, and like, again, I've traveled a lot for work, and something that always stood out to me was just like these experiences at coffee shops, or even just with the ritual of drinking coffee, making coffee. So it kind of just started to fold together. I started thinking about, I spent some time in India, and I was remembering standing on a corner at this, like, it was less than $1, but they make you a coffee right there and they mix it with cream and sugar. And even though that's not my thing, that was the moment. That's that coffee. I'm enjoying that experience. And, the Pacific Northwest having those coffee booths, which never knew was a thing, pulled up to the wrong one and saw too much of a human being. But yeah, just kind of just meshed together these incredible flavors with these experiences that I have of coffee shops, the conversations I have with friends at them, the ritual of making it in the morning. It just kind of really became front and center in my, I don't know, daily life. Of, I no longer was just looking for a real quick coffee. I was now looking for something to kind of elevate my experience, connect with other people, get to talk to them, say, hey, I had this coffee, you had that coffee. Tell me what you liked. And just kind of became a thing to have a conversation over and something I really enjoyed. So ever since then, I've just been, trying to get as much as I can without over caffeinating.
You mentioned that you were working in environmental science, and I saw some picture of some work you were doing during the pandemic, handing out supplies as well. I'm assuming as part of some sort of volunteer or work-based thing there. A lot going on. When do you start actually roasting in addition to whatever your career path is?
Yeah, this is kind of funny. I bought my house in Philly a while ago, and at some point, I got a new neighbor. Immediately had a crush on her. Got to talking, rode some bikes together, and we would share coffee in the morning. Kind of, she'd have an espresso maker, I'd have pour over, and we'd switch between which one we made for the day. And through homebrewing, I had an ad pop up one time that said, "Oh, save 15% on roasted coffee or unroasted coffee beans." I'm like, what do you do with those? And I started going down a rabbit hole of like, oh man, I don't need another expensive hobby right now. But through sharing this coffee with my neighbor, I had this idea of like, I'm going to revisit this because I think this is the ultimate form of flirtation, is to create a coffee and roast it and share that. And yeah, it worked. I live with her now, and that's the other half of Brainwave. So it's very rare in the life of me that I get to successfully flirt with a weird skill.
You get some green, and I mean, I'm assuming you bought a roaster, or you bought some sort of, or you found a roaster to work on. How does that progress from, this idea that I'm going to try it one time at least, to you start doing it regularly and it becomes something more important to you?
Yeah, so sort of it became a thing where I'd find small importers, just kind of the major ones that are out there, and go through the list and look through origins, look through tasting notes, and be like, wow, I've never had a coffee from there. I'd like to try that. And then I'd buy the greens, roast them up on. I had a fresh roast SR 800. Then it became, outside of this relationship I grew, I just was excited to share it with my friends. And I was starting to mail it to people, and I'm traveling to Vermont to see my friends, and I'm bringing all this coffee with them and with me, and sharing it with them, and it's turning into this ritual we'd have where we get to like sit down and make a cup of coffee together, and they taste it and kind of ask me like, hey, what am I tasting here? Why is this good? Why is this different? And kind of explaining to them what I taste. Not necessarily the right thing, but it kind of got to click with them, and it was really really amazing experience. So through that avenue, actually, I was sharing coffee with a bunch of people in this tiny little town in Vermont, and took some to a bike shop. And he came back to me and he said, "Hey, you know what? We're having a bike ride. There's going to be a lot of people here, and I'd love to have pour over coffee. If you could roast it for us, that'd be great." I said, "Sure. How much do you need?" And we kind of did the math and realized that it was about, I think he needed 20 pounds of coffee. So I went back to my fresh roast, and over a couple weeks, I roasted 20 pounds of coffee, and I learned how much it could be a pain in the butt to do. But it was fun the whole time, just getting to crank out these roasts. And I went to this bike ride. I had 10 V60s in front of me, and I was just pouring coffee for people who, uh, for the record, it was a very anomalous snowstorm that rolled in. So now everyone's cold, they're tired, and they want hot coffee. And I have a 10-gallon kettle of hot water, 10 V60s, and ground coffee. And I'm just sitting there banging them out and sharing with people. And, I had such great feedback and really positive conversations with people. They still reach out. And now that we're selling coffee, they buy coffee, and they remind me of, the coffees that they bought. Oh yeah, that Sumatra that you had out there, that was so good. And do you have anything similar to that? And, it just means so much to me to hear that. So after the bike ride, I had sold my house and I moved in with my next door neighbor, M, and I had some extra money and said, "Hey, I'm going to try this. I'm going to stop draining my wallet buying these green coffees that I just give out to my friends and family and say, maybe we can turn this into something. Maybe we could start a business and see where it goes. And yeah, a lot of hiccups along the way. I had that idea in February and it didn't pan out until I guess a month and a half ago. So it took a long time to get here, but finally got all the permits and licensing, and yeah, it's been amazing. It's been truly special to be able to do this.
For the record, when you were roasting that 20 pounds on your fresh roast machine, how many pounds at a time, or how much coffee were you roasting at a time?
250 grams at a time. So yeah, it took me, I guess that'd be about 25, 26 roasts, maybe more. I try to block that out of my memory at this point. It was a rough week.
What are you roasting on now?
So I upgraded to a Kaleido M10. It has a capacity of 1.2 kilograms. So definitely an upgrade. And perhaps I should have listened to the advice I read on the internet a million times over that buy something too big because you'll grow into it versus sitting there doing 20 roasts back to back yet again. But, it's, I think I love the process so much. I love the science of it. I love the smell. I love watching the beans change. That first time I heard first crack, it was, amazing. It was exciting and I still get excited. So I don't mind roasting a lot back to back.
The idea to start was, back in February. I don't think that really is really that long to have a company up and running and selling coffee. But I'm wondering, is this a full-time job, or are you still working as a scientist and doing two full-time jobs? Or, what's your life balance, if there is one?
There's no balance. I still work full time environmental consulting, and I have Brainwave on the side, which started pretty small, and there's been a lot of attention lately, so requiring a lot more of my time. And I'm in grad school too, so I'll be graduating with a master's in geology in 2 months. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of everything right now. Still somehow finding time for hobbies, and hopefully not letting my relationship fall to the wayside. So trying to learn how to manage time and spend it wisely. Fortunately, I'm kind of good at it, I suppose.
Well, and you mentioned the relationship. Your partner in Brainwave is your partner in life. What made them decide that they were on board with this idea and wanted to be involved?
I can't help but think she was riding my stoke in this, and the more excited I got, she's like, "Yeah, yeah, this is great." The idea started. We were kind of laying in bed, going to sleep, and my brain's going a million miles a minute. Probably too much coffee for the day, and I was like, "Hey, let's do it. Let's try this." And I think we had always joked about it. That's the joke. Every morning we'd have this fresh roasted coffee. Hey, we should start a business. We should start a business. And then I finally said, actually, let's do it. Let's start it. And she's a graphic designer by trade, and this has been a really great thing for her too. She's gotten to have a lot of creative freedom. She did all the design, all of the branding, and all the website stuff, which I couldn't draw a stick figure if I tried. So I'm so forever grateful for this. And every time she had an idea, I'm like, I love it. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know. Just roll with it, and we'll see what happens. And yeah, it's been pretty cool to watch her brain churn. And I'd peek over her shoulder. She's drawing a T-shirt design that we just made, which is, I never thought I'd ever be making T-shirts, but I got to see her design, and just watching her go through those steps. It's like, wow, this is really cool. This is special. I'm excited for you that you get to do this. So, I think from the start of it, it's always been kind of sharing coffee together. And now I hope she's just as excited as I am that, we get to share coffee together and we still have our morning rituals together. But it's taking it a step further now, and we're branching out to more people. And, I think one of the hard things at first was, well, I guess when I started this, I was clinging on to this idea of community and sharing with people, almost, the we're working at a winery, giving wine tastings. It was the most fulfilling thing in the world. I got to connect with people. I think my favorite experience there was I'd have customers come in, a couple, and more often than not, one person loved wine, the other was just tagging along, maybe a date. And I got to have that. I wasn't always a wine person, so I'd I'd speak to the person who wasn't into wine. I'd be like, okay, I get it. You don't know wine, you don't like wine. What do you like? Do you like beer? Like, oh yeah, I love beer. I'm like, okay, what kind of beer do you like? Oh, I love stouts. Okay, well, try this Cabernet. It has like the same sort of deep flavor, rich. It's dry, so share some qualities, and maybe when you take this sip, close your eyes a little bit and say, this is how can I relate this to a wine or a beer? And it would always click. I got so much satisfaction from that. So I tried to really like think that I'd be doing the same thing with coffee. And since we don't have a store, we're just kind of online. It kind of turns into every once in a while this transaction where someone just buys coffee and then I never hear from them again. And um, if I'm being honest with you, this has been a hard thing. I have a real hard time being vulnerable, and I've given up so many hobbies. I have 3 guitars in the basement, 2 basses, and anytime it came down to like, oh, you play guitar, what do you play something? I'm like, no, 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 it's okay. And then I just, give up the guitar or whatever it is. And coffee's been similar, where I'm pouring my heart and soul into this thing, and I'm finding these beans, and I'm getting excited about it, and I'm roasting them, and then someone buys it, and I don't hear from them again, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't know if you liked it. I made a delivery like within the first week of opening, and they were so excited. We had like messages online. I dropped it off like, oh, thank you so much. We'll shoot you a DM. I'm like, awesome. Never heard from them. I think about that every day. I'm like, oh, I want to find, I want to go back in the orders and like find their email and be like, hey, was it okay? Did you like it? Like, I want to know. And so, yeah, I think I'm starting to find a groove here and really get back connected to that. And I'm trying to open conversations with people and say, hey, I saw you ordered these things. It's really exciting. Or, we have that subscription that I'm trying to like tailor to people's tastes, and just say like, what do you like? What kind of beer do you like? What kind of dessert do you like? And um, it's really like scratching that itch for me again. And I know M is just beyond excited to have that same kind of connection with people. And like, man, like really, really nailed that one. This guy loved IPAs. He stopped drinking. And I'm like, well, I have a Hesea bean where they actually put galaxy hops into the fermentation. And like, I think you might like this. So yeah, I think we're both long. I was meandering, but I think her and I are both kind of like sharing similar values of wanting to connect with each other and take that a step further, and now like create this community. So it's been really great.
On your journey there, one of the things you kind of talked about was what I think is often unexpected for people who start home roasting and then start turning it into a business, which is there's a little bit of loneliness involved in that process because you're roasting it and putting it out there. Sometimes doing the show, I feel like I'm just talking into the void. I see people listening, but maybe I'm not getting that same feedback. And I can't speak for you, but I know in my experience, sometimes all it takes is that one listener, that one person to reach out and make a point that this impacted them, and
Yeah.
that'll keep me going and keep me motivated and excited for the next day and the next day. And there's something about entrepreneurship, I think, where you need to find those victories and hold on to them. And as you keep having more and more of those little victories, it creates this foundation of belief in yourself.
Yeah.
That's what you lean on the days when you're struggling with your roast, or the sale isn't coming through, or whatever it might be. You go look back at that foundation and say, oh yeah, this is why I'm doing this, because it's going to continue. But there is a disconnect between roasting out of love and passion, or doing whatever you're doing, and then trying to make money to justify continuing to do it. Those
Uh-huh.
are two different things. And when you're also doing other things, or having another job or whatever, at some point you reach a level where you've got to make choices. And I'm gonna stay tuned to your story as you get to those points. See what happens.
Yeah.
The name Brainwave came from where?
The name Brainwave came because sometimes my brain doesn't work so well. The idea for it was, as I was sitting there laying in bed brainstorming stuff, I'm like, man, Em and I are really on the same wavelength about a lot of things. And what that translated to was brainwave. And I said it out loud, and she's like, what does brainwave mean? I'm like, oh, I meant wavelength. I'm like, brainwave's cool. Let's go with this idea. And we started talking about it, thinking about it. Then all of a sudden I'm like, brainwave. What if there's like a three-eyed cat with waves coming out of its brain? Just, late night thoughts. And yeah, that's kind of just it's just a really goofy mistake that turned into kind of a cool logo. So just rode with it.
Happy accidents.
Yeah.
I want to roll back around to that Hosea roasting competition. The conceit of the competition was that you, as the roaster, received 3 beans, unknown to you what their origin was or any of the details, and you had to blend them together to create a coffee that represented all 3 in some way. And I'm wondering, how did you approach that challenge? I mean, what's the feeling of getting coffee in the mail and there's no explanation, no description, nowhere to start? How do you begin that process?
I loved that aspect of it, which is why I was most excited. And, the first thing I did, I got the package. I looked for clues. There weren't any. So I inspected all the beans. I looked at them, and there were a couple giveaways. The A bean, which wound up being a natural Brazil, had some characteristics to it that I was looking at. I'm like, yeah, that seems like it's a natural process. There's still some of that sugar and silver skin on it. And the next bean had like really interesting coloration, still had some of those natural looking features, but I could tell that one was a little more processed. And then the last bean was very clean. I knew it was washed, or I thought it was. So I kind of took that information with me into the first roasts. I did an initial roast of each, roasted them all kind of similarly with that bias in mind of, washed, maybe fermented, maybe anaerobic, I don't know, and then a natural. So then I waited a little bit, tasted them all, and I think immediately knew the first one was Brazil. It tasted, chocolatey, peanutty, little caramel. And I said, okay, that's going to be the base because I know that adds body to a blend. The next one I had, it honestly, when I was grinding it tasted a little funky and fermented. So I was really just leaning into this anaerobic idea, and wound up being and I had a feeling it was Colombian. So, because I know a lot of those wind up being, pretty highly processed. So, and Hosea, again, I'm using clues here. They do find a lot of really cool, fun, experimental Colombian beans. So in my brain, I'm thinking, all right, they're throwing a twist here. So I kept that in mind. I tried it. That one it's really like fruity, chocolatey, and yeah, had this like really nice quality to it. Really clean. I loved it. And then the last bean, I incorrectly guessed it Kenya, but I knew it was Africa. I thought again. That one was more, floral. I tasted a lot of citrus in that one. So I more or less came up with a Venn diagram of flavors. And I said, this bee coffee, this what I suspect to be Colombian, shares the chocolate quality with the first bean and fruitiness with the C bean. So in my brain, I'm thinking, I want that to be the star. That has the most overlap in this Venn diagram of flavors. And I knew the other two were, I know they're supposed to all shine, but I needed to kind of have those work together to bring out the best of the first, but also stand alone. So my approach after that was, I knew that the first bean from Brazil, the A bean, I wanted to develop a little more than the others. I wanted to roast it more like a Brazilian, so kind of stretched it out, tried to bring out more body to complement the lighter roasts that I was going to do for the others. And I think I did all right with that. Perhaps maybe a little too light on the percentage. And then Yeah, the other two beans, I kind of went quick. I roasted them pretty quickly, quicker than I normally would. But I tried to get some acidity out of there. I tried to really lean into the fruitiness. Um, and yeah, I thought I botched it. it I tasted it off roast. The grind smelled slightly sour, and I was like, oh no, I didn't have time to do it again. I waited too long. But I cupped a few ratios together, and it actually tasted really good. So I was like, we'll see what happens. And I put them together. But yeah, again, I was just trying to. I knew that the Brazil bean would be the base, and I figured that would probably be a low percentage if I developed it enough. But I wanted half of that blend to be the Colombian coffee, that B bean, just so it could be sort of the star that gets boosted up by the supporting actors, and then the C bean, the Ethiopian washed. Yeah, roasted that quickly too, and yeah, I think it all came together pretty well.
It's interesting to me to hear this idea of a Venn diagram of flavors and that being kind of the base for how you decided to work with it. On the other side of it, in the judging arena, we essentially calibrated our tastes every day to this is what 30% of each of these coffees would
Mm,
be if you just put them together. And it ended up not being a great blend. A third of each, the coffee flavors just didn't work. It's kind of muddied and whatever, but you're able to start picking things out. And as we were going through the multi-day judging, it was very clear that the Brazil was what most people had struggled with. They struggled. It either was overwhelming or it was not apparent at all. And so, finding the coffees that brought out a balance of the three was really our challenge and the challenge of the roasters. Uh, when you send it off, you don't really know you're going to win, and then as we talked about earlier, you kind of didn't even realize it as you were watching the announcement. Now that you have one, did that inspire any feelings of confidence in you, or did that change kind of your attitude about the roasting game? Did they send you a trophy? What did you take away from this? Afterwards, what's the lesson learned?
it was a very weird mix of emotions. I'll be totally honest with you here. I First thing I thought was, wow, they messed up. They made a mistake. They switched the label on them. There's no way.
They did have me in the judging room, so there's always a chance.
Well, I trust your senses now, but yeah, I immediately just dismissed it. There's like there's no way. I started thinking, got in my head a little bit, saying like, perhaps I just got lucky. Maybe I just had that one weird roast that just went perfect, and there's no way I could ever be able to do that again. And I thought about it a lot, and I started to accept it, but it's been tough. I still think sometimes like, wow, how did that happen? And I wish I was in the judging room. I honestly wish like I could taste other coffee blends and could have been there to experience it. Not so much just to say like, oh, that's why mine's better, but just to like really see what other people did, and to see how it could have tasted, or like other ratios and how that brought out different things, because I didn't have a lot of time to play with it. But it wasn't until I had a phone call with Emily at Hasea, just going through a little interview so they can put a blog post about Meet the Roaster, and they did that for the top three, I think. And I wouldn't know because I didn't read it, because I don't like reading about myself. I browsed it though, so we were talking, and she passed down this little nugget for me. Maybe I was being self-deprecating, but she said, hey, you know we had a lot of coffees that day, and there were a few of them, like you were saying, that stood out. We had 70, and every once in a while you'd have this coffee that you said, oh yeah, all right, we're back. And she reminded me that my coffee was one of those. I got to pique the interest of some judges, and she left me with the advice that through all of my experience with beer judging and working at the winery, and roasting coffee and tasting coffee, that I should trust my gut. And that that is what I think it took for me to accept this, to realize that, maybe I shouldn't be so hard on myself. Maybe I should allow this win to happen, and say like, yeah, you know what? I have been doing this, maybe not as long, definitely not as long as a lot of people, but I've been obsessing over this long enough where, I'm calibrated. I know my equipment. I know how different beans roast. I know what to look for when I'm roasting. I've read all the books, and I've reread the books and watched a bunch of YouTube videos. And yeah, at some point I needed to hear that I know what I'm doing, and I needed to believe it. So yeah, it's been, it's been kind of a roller coaster, I'd say, of emotions here. And yeah, I think I was touching on it earlier about just like this whole idea of vulnerability. And it felt very personal to make that blend, and it is very personal to share coffee with people. So just to hear that it resonated with people, I think was really special. And to me, like, again, I didn't know there were prizes. I could have easily foregone them, and just like accepted some of the feedback and the praise, which has been amazing. But you know, uh, no trophy. They do have a little plaque in the warehouse with my name on it, which is really cool. I got pictures from all the guys there. Yeah, they sent that really awesome brewer that you posted on your story, the Hikaru. Wow, that thing's
Yeah,
every morning.
it's like a spaceship.
It is. I turn the lights off in the kitchen in the morning, and I press start, and I watch the colors change. It's a lot of fun to play with. But yeah, I mean, the sponsors, holy moly! I got a lot of great prizes, and I think like it's going to be fun to play with those and kind of like dial in some new brewing methods, and I get to try some matcha tea, which is pretty cool. So
Well, I'd
yeah,
say the takeaway here is that Hasea, if you're listening, I know that you are. You're flying Max out for next year's competition as an honorary judge, right? And then you can be on the other side of the table if you want.
you know, I'll be there.
I don't speak for them, but I'm just saying. You do other things. Obviously, you've got a career. You mentioned cycling in particular, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I saw a series of photos somewhere that said that you kind of bike the Gap Trail, which is a bike trail kind of from Pittsburgh to DC, which is on my bucket list to do in the next year or two. How does getting away from science, coffee is still science, getting away from your job, from coffee roasting and going out and doing stuff like that, how does that help you in your life? How does it reset you? And if you're out, what's the best way to make a cup of coffee when you're on the trail?
Yeah, I don't want to say that I had instant coffee that trip and it wasn't the good stuff. They've gone a long way in instant coffee lately, I found out. I changed that setup. I bought a little travel pour over machine now. Not a machine, a dripper, and actually gearing up for a trip next week. So I'll be elsewhere next week, doing a whole tour in Vermont, hitting all the breweries and coffee shops and all that. But we'll have good coffee that time, I promise. And I say that to Em and my friends that I'm going with. But yeah, honestly, I'm going to keep coming back to the same theme of just like community and connection with people, being able to disconnect because there really wasn't service on the trails, and spend quality time. And I say quality in a weird way because you're suffering the whole time, but this is quality time with people. You don't have much to do other than sit on your bike, be in your head, and talk to your friends. It's really freeing. And I think especially that first part of being in your head where you kind of have to face those demons, you kind of have to face those negative thoughts, and really just overcome them in a way. You can sit there and think like, oh man, this ride sucks, or my butt hurts, or I'm hungry. But I think about mistakes and weird things that happen at work. But once you're unplugged and you're sitting there in your head, you're like, man, you know what? Look around. Look at the nature right now. Listen to the birds. Look at all the other people out here who are just having a good time. I really hope you do the Gap Trail, and I'm excited for you to do it. I think it's a great ride and like really approachable, and except for the one day that it was 20 miles uphill if you do it the way I did it. Otherwise, you get 20 miles downhill. Um, Everybody, they described it as kind of like a European type community where everybody's just so nice. You pass people constantly and they're all doing the same thing. And every time they're like, which way are you going? What day is this for you? And yeah, it was just really special to just kind of unplug from the phone. And as much as it's a great thing to have to be connected with people who might not be close to you. I mean, we wouldn't be talking without technology, of course, but it's really, sometimes a nice calibration to unplug from that and just remember that, they're the things that are surrounding you are also super important, and just getting to think about life and the future. And when I do these rides and I like exert myself a little bit, and whether it's races or rides, runs, I always wind up getting a little emotional. It always like brings this, I think it might be just the pain and suffering that you experience in your body, but like mentally it forces me to process a lot of things in my life. And I don't always get to think of how grateful I am, or I don't always get to think of, yeah, I got cut off in traffic, but like I got to come home to like my awesome cats or whatever. And when you're on a bike like that, I come back to those things and think like, man, it's been a wild ride, and I'm doing a lot, and I'm accomplishing the bike ride at this moment. And you get to like really process that stuff and feel special. Yeah. And to be able to share that with friends, if you do it with your friends, or if you're alone, strangers, it's really an incredible experience. And yeah, something I'll never forget. And I'm hooked now. I'll keep doing it. So
There's something about suffering communally that makes it easier to smile in the moment.
yeah.
You're not the only one. Quick aside, I left on the first day of a bike packing trip in Oregon, and day one, out of the campground, take a right, 60 feet into it. It's a 900-foot vertical climb. The first time I've ever ridden a fully loaded bicycle, 60 pounds or whatever it was. And I'm about a third of the way up and I think I'm going to die. And I'm like, this was a bad idea. I'm going to quit. This is terrible. And then as I lifted my head and looked up the hill. I saw a half a dozen other people who had started off, the morning right before me, also struggling and or walking. And I thought, oh, it's not just me. And if they can keep going, then I'll keep going, as long as I can. And eventually, came up over that hill and then realized, oh, well, I can do a hill that size. So I could probably do another hill or a bigger hill or whatever. And just kept, one foot in front of the other. But it helped to have that community to suffer with
Oh yeah.
and, and survive. We're already kind of coming up on our time, and we've got so much more to talk about. So I want to make sure that I get to a couple of key things. And the first one is you've already shared some really valuable pieces of life advice, I think, or at least I've pulled some out. But I'm wondering if there's any piece of advice that you've received during this coffee journey, or just in general, that you find yourself using and you'd like to share.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think that advice that Hosea shared with me of, trusting your gut, um, I think really is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. I think a lot of people and a lot of applications outside of coffee roasting is maybe I'm projecting and I'm just kind of speaking for myself here, but a lot of times I wind up getting, that analysis paralysis where I have information overload, and I'll read a book and it says, oh, you must adhere to these things to make a great coffee, and then you go on YouTube and they're like, this guy's like, oh, I did it this way. I'm like, well, that's not like that thing. So now I'm conflicted and I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so many things out there. But at some point you just got to say like, I think I've learned enough. I think what I thought initially will work. And if it doesn't, I have these other resources to pull from. Obviously you need a foundation, but I have these other resources to pull from that I know how to tweak it now. Just experimentation is my scientifically my career, but it helps. Being able to just like make small tweaks along the way and say like, all right, this was great, and then you change one small variable and it's better. Well, now you know what you changed to make it better versus changing a bunch of things. And now you're like, oh, I screwed it up. So that's like, yeah, that's definitely really helped me is trusting myself. And I'll definitely, I keep saying it. I'm not sorry for it, but just like in general, be vulnerable. It's okay to, you know, pour your heart and soul into something and kind of get laughed at for it. But it's hard. And again, I've struggled with it so much, but yeah, at the end of the day, like every band is someone's favorite band, even Nickelback. But it's just one of those things where if you believe in yourself and you kind of pour your heart and soul into what you're doing, roasting coffee, running a coffee shop, doing anything in life, but just kind of put it all out there. And if you believe in it, then I think that's already successful. Yeah, you don't really have to worry too much about other people opinions sometimes. Although caveat that with if everybody says what you're doing is pretty bad, then maybe you should listen.
Well, on that note, you mentioned earlier things have been growing, things are progressing. There's been some attention lately. What comes next? What's the future of Brainwave Coffee Roasters?
Yeah, I think this all came on a lot faster than I expected. So it's forced me to really face that question. And I think at this stage we're still growing organically and we have a lot of room for growth. I think I'm making really meaningful connections right now that are helping me. After the competition, I've gotten the chance to speak to many of the competitors, whether I reached out to them or they reached out to me, and we shared how we approached the blend and how we approached the roasts. And I got to speak to some people who, I didn't realize I'd ever get to talk to. Just people like very highly experienced, highly decorated coffee roasters and talking to me. And, I think I'm taking all of this and it's all so valuable. I guess my point is I'm still growing and there's so much growth to have, so much to learn. And realistically, brick and mortar is kind of the goal at this point. And I'd like to, I'm putting a lot of thought and a lot of pen to paper to make that a reality. I'll admit that I started reading one of your books. Well, the first installment of your book. And I picked it up obviously because you had advertised it and I saw it in your feed, but the storyline kind of resonated with me. This idea of, you know, being stuck at an office job and wondering like what's in store for me, what's in the future, and just kind of being a little, you know, wanting more out of life. And I think that's kind of where I'm at is I had I'm not going to say a midlife crisis. I'm not old enough for that yet. I hope. I don't know. It's close, but
We're allowed to have two or three now.
okay,
Things have changed as the technology sped everything up. Like we're getting through a couple of crises.
that's true. So I'm in part maybe two of my crises over my lifespan, and I was kind of forced to think about my future. And there's days at everyone's job that are just not ideal, and I had a few opportunities come my way. I'd say once in a lifetime, but it happened twice to open a brewery, and it was all invested. Everything was laid out, but I kind of had to put that aside for many reasons. And through those conversations, though, with my friend I was going to do it with, the outcome for both of us was really like, this is the dream because this is something that I would create, that I would do. And at the end of the day, I am fulfilled when I make those connections, and I'm fulfilled when I get to create something and share with somebody. And I'm not as fulfilled when I'm kind of just typing away at a computer or going somewhere to work. And although my job is meaningful at times and it is fulfilling in that sense, I think like what I want out of life is to create something that I get to share with my friends and my family and future family and pass down and just get to say like, hey, I made this. I worked hard. and I got to do this. So, I think the future, if we want to talk about that, is I'd like to transition to doing this full time. It makes me happy. Every time I get an order, like my eyes, oh my, wow, this is amazing. And getting feedback from people is incredible, and just getting to share stuff. And yeah, it would be way more fulfilling if I got to do this in person, and kind of like, you know, be able to facilitate someone else's first time they tried a coffee that blew their mind. And like, wow, it would be so special for me to be on the other side of that, and then give that to somebody. So I'm really putting a lot of thought and effort into writing that plan down so I can make it a reality.
Well, I certainly wish you good luck in that. And I was hoping you had read my coloring book and not one of the other ones, but I certainly appreciate it. When you are out and about and you're in the world, you're in Philadelphia, you stop for a coffee. What are you going to order?
I was hoping you'd ask this because it's it's a multifaceted answer. I think the first thing that I do is I'll look at the menu. I know other people's answers and I agree with those, but I always look at the menu and I find the most interesting tasting notes. And maybe it's a bad thing to do, but I feel like, if I taste a coffee from a coffee shop prepared the way that they intended on it, and I could taste those, like, outstanding. I'm hooked. I'm sold for life. I'm coming back every day. So I really look for those interesting things. Obviously, if I, see a fun Colombian or Ethiopian, I'm drawn to it. But I also like kind of a sucker for cappuccinos. I think it's a really nice blend, a good ratio of milk to coffee. So I can't say I'm a very, very well versed in espresso. I had many bad ones before I started having good ones, so I'm still scarred. But yeah, those are my two go-tos.
I'm actually, while we've been chatting, I've been drinking your Thermal Shock Columbia in part because in the tasting notes it said lychee, and I was like, I don't even know what that means. And I'm just going to see what happens here. Max, I really just appreciate the time today, and congratulations on not just winning a roasting comp. That's all well and good, and I think valuable, but taking this step into creating something of your own to put out in the world, and taking a chance to find out if anyone likes it or not. I think that the emotional component can't be overlooked there, and I think you did a great job of describing it for the audience. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. This is, really special to me. I've actually listened to your podcast a lot, especially when I was trying to learn how to roast. I'd had Coffee Smarter pulled up, trying to eke out some information, see what I can do here. And yeah, it's been a real treat to get to meet you and share the stage. So this is fun.
Oh, I almost forgot. Favorite Keanu Reeves movie?
You know, I don't know if anyone's ever said this before. A Scanner Darkly.
Oh, no one said it on this show.
All right. Yeah, it's
Animated.
yeah, like that weird rotoscope stuff. Philip
Yeah.
K. Dick is my favorite author. I love science fiction books. So when that came out, I was like, I have to watch that, and it was just weird, and I love it. But I also really like Speed, and I think the plots are a little ridiculous. And when I was a kid, I thought it was insane, but getting older, I'm like,
When I was a kid, after I saw Speed, I was terrified to get on a city bus for like years. So now I'm all about public transportation. Back then, I was like, can't wait to get a car. Okay, some quick key takeaways from today's podcast. Max is now, and forever, a champion coffee roaster. He didn't realize that there were prizes and prestige attached to the Hosea roasting competition. He merely entered as an exercise to advance his craft and get some unbiased feedback to the beans he was roasting. With his background in environmental science, he is by nature analytical. He's experienced at repetition and setting up experiments that record data in increments. If you were to brew a coffee roaster in a lab, those are some of the key skills. Brew a roaster in a lab. See what I did there? Brew a roaster. It was the experience of communing and communicating with others that really drew Max into coffee. He He had experienced that before with wine, and is now trying to recreate it on a bigger personal scale with Brainwave roasters. He brought up the vulnerability that comes with selling something you've created. It can be a little bit like screaming into the void. You see someone buying something you made, you know they bought it, but did they like it? Would they buy it again? You want to reach out to them and ask, should I keep going down this path? Am I making a huge mistake? Please just tell me if everything was okay. I'm so sorry if it wasn't, and, 5 stars. Awesome. Thank you so much. On to the next order. With his roasting championship blend of coffees, Max still doubted himself. He thought he had botched it, and even after the win, he struggled to believe it was real. And even then, he wasn't sure he deserved the accolades. But a chat with the ever-wise Emily from Hasea Coffee Source led him to the reminder that he needs to trust his gut. And not only that, he needs to believe he knows what he's doing. He needed to hear it to allow himself to finally embrace it. Finally, and I can say this with personal experience, analysis paralysis is real. That's our show for today. You can find a longer recap in our newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. Be sure to follow Max and Brainwave Roasters online at brainwaveroasters.com and at Brainwave Roasters on Instagram. Those links are in our podcast notes. If you're listening today on Apple or Spotify, please tap the follow button and give us as many stars as you feel we've earned. If you are an analog human like me, please tell a friend about the show. It does really help. I'm always telling people about Roastar Coffee Packaging. Shout out to them. They've been a huge support of this show. You can find them online at roastar.com. They're our presenting sponsor. And if you're trying to tell the story of your small business, your home coffee roaster, your burgeoning coffee roaster, they're an incredible support that will enable you to create a bag that best represents those specialty coffee beans you're roasting. We're also supported by some other great coffee industry partners, Zoombar Coffee and Tea, Maria Coffee, Cape Horn Green Coffee Importers, Crossings Coffee, and Hasea Coffee Source, Ignite Coffee Company, Ascend Coffee Roasters, Civets Roasting Machines, Me and My Uncle Coffee, Craft 42 Coffee Roasters, Relative Coffee, and Cozy Canine Coffees. Before I go, I do have a scary coffee anecdote to share in honor of Halloween, which is maybe my least favorite holiday. Sorry if you're a Halloween person. This is just me, but this is one of the more terrifying things I've ever heard. And it does relate to coffee. So, if you can't handle scary coffee things, you fast forward a little bit. This actually really happened to someone I know. They ordered a shot of espresso at this faraway cafe. I can't remember it exactly. They were telling me how they watched intently as the barista ground the beans, tamped the grounds, pulled down on a long manual lever on the espresso machine. 1 second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds, 32, 38. They told me how the syrupy brown liquid filled their little espresso mug. It was shoved across the counter to them. They swirled it briefly with a spoon and put it to their lips. And honestly, I can see the look of terror on this person's face as they're telling me this story. They take that deep sip and a shiver goes through their entire body. And to their horror, the coffee was over-extracted. Terrifying. That's the Coffee People podcast for today. Thank you for listening, for sharing this podcast, asking us questions, and being coffee curious. This show is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network, and this episode has been written, produced, researched, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Wherever you find yourself today, I hope it's with a fine cup of coffee. Thank you for listening to us tell the stories of coffee people. Cheers, everyone. Hey everyone, this is Ryan, the host of the Coffee Smarter and Coffee People podcasts. I've mentioned on the show several times, actually, that I use Baratza grinders at home. I found them to be consistent, durable, and frankly a company that I feel values their customers. I recently became an affiliate partner with Baratza, and if you're in the market for a new grinder, as well as a fan of this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you'd use the link in the show notes or on roastwestcoast.com to make the purchase. Doing so will support the creation of this show, and you'll be getting a great grinder for your countertop. Baratza is only the third company we've partnered with to do any sort of affiliate marketing, and while that is 3 more than we partnered with last year, we're still fairly picky about it. Thanks for supporting Roast West Coast by clicking the link to Baratza in this podcast's show notes, and enjoy your new coffee grinder. If you are in the early stages of your coffee journey, we want to support you. Check out the Coffee Smarter Education podcasts. Coffee Smarter is designed to enable coffee drinkers to brew a better cup of coffee at home. And Coffee Smarter Pro covers industry-specific topics for baristas, roasters, shop owners, and aspiring coffee professionals. You'll find both shows on your favorite podcast platforms or on our website at coffeesmarterpodcast.com.